good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome to this webinar on reskilling, upskilling, and skilling women to bridge the manufacturing workforce gap in workforce labor gap. My name is Cleopatra Mugyenyi, and I am the director at ICRW's Africa Regional Office. And I will be moderating this session. So I'd like to thank you for joining this second webinar, which is part of a two-series webinar series. And the first webinar was held on the 22nd of June, and this recording is going to be available on the ICRW webpage. So this first webinar really started the conversation on reskilling, on upskilling, and on skilling women to fully participate in manufacturing in Kenya. And this particular two-part webinar series is derived from findings of the first ever study on women in manufacturing that was undertaken by ICRW in 2020. So this study revealed that the lack of appropriate skill sets is actually a leading contributor to women's low participation in the manufacturing sector. Compelling evidence has shown that over the past 5 years, manufacturing contributes between 3 to 9% of Kenya's GDP, and it's expected to rise to 15% by the end of this year. But why exactly are we focusing on skilling, reskilling, and upskilling? Many reasons. One of them, manufacturing is a key pillar to economic growth, and the rate of growth of the sector has a direct and indirect impact on the development of other sectors in the economy. The participation of women is critical in driving industrial growth. And while manufacturing is a fulfilling career that has limitless opportunities, women's participation as owners and founders of manufacturing businesses, as senior leaders in the industry, and also as members of the general workforce remains very limited. Currently, only 17% of the total workforce are actually women here in Kenya. In almost every country in the world, men are also more likely to participate in labor markets compared to women. And when we look at manufacturing globally as well, the trend remains the same. Like I've said, in Kenya, only 17% of the manufacturing sector's workforce is made up of women. So women face unique structural, cultural, and historical challenges that inhibit their entry, their stay, and growth in manufacturing. And one of the key factors is educational attainment as well as skills, as I've indicated at the top of this discussion. So evidence has shown that targeted skilling, reskilling, and upskilling has the potential to accelerate gender diversity and inclusion in the manufacturing sector and beyond. So as a global research institute, ICRW actually works in the area of women's economic empowerment, and we're very keen to continue the discussions and generate evidence for the inclusion, the full inclusion and participation of women in non-traditional sectors, with manufacturing being one of them. So this webinar is going to provide us a platform to discuss the status and the context of women's technical skill sets in manufacturing, the barriers that inhibit women's acquisition of necessary technical skills, the opportunities for bridging this manufacturing skill set gender gap, and then also policy and practice actions that are needed to skill, reskill, and upskill girls and women. But before we get started, I'll just make a few housekeeping comments. If the slide can be put up, please. Okay, this webinar is being recorded, and for everybody, the webinar is being recorded, and we will be sharing the recording of the webinar after the webinar ends. We are also keeping everybody on mute. And if you have any questions, please put your questions in the chat box or in the question and answer section of your Zoom screen. We will not be having a separate question and answer session. What we're going to be doing is looking at the questions as they come in through the chat function and through the QA function. And then I will be then sharing these questions with our panelists. We have two panels, two short panel discussions with a variety of experts. And I think I'll start by introducing them now. So if you can put up the slide with the first set, thank you. So Ms. Caroline Njuki is the Chief Technical Advisor of Inclusive Jobs and Education with the International Labour Organization in Kenya. She leads ILO's work on jobs, employment, and education, while also serving as the officer in charge in Kenya. Prior to her current role, she headed the IGAD Regional Secretariat on Forced Displacement and Mixed Migration. She has also worked with the International Organization for Migration in Somalia on issues to do with migration, governance, and has also provided technical support to various humanitarian and development organizations. Welcome, Caroline. Ms. Phyllis Kiplagat is a senior industrial training officer at the National Industrial Training Authority, NITA, in Kenya. She's a senior industrial training officer who has been serving as the head of research and curriculum development section and has over 23 years of experience in education and training and 5 years of experience in curriculum development. Phyllis participates in the development of competence-based curricula for NITA centers and other accredited industrial training centers. And she previously served as the deputy principal and industrial trainer at NITA in Athi River. She has also served for 16 years as a teacher with the Teachers Service Commission. Thank you and welcome, Phyllis. Ms. Evelyn Komba is the gender and advocacy lead at the SGD Kenya Forum. She works as a gender and advocacy specialist, where she leads the implementation, tracking, and reporting of SGD 5 in Kenya. Evelyn has extensive experience in gender mainstreaming, gender policy development, analysis, implementation, monitoring and evaluation, gender research, gender data advocacy, gender capacity enhancement, women's economic empowerment, and access to gender justice. Welcome, Evelyn. Eric Yegon is a senior gender technical specialist with ICRW. He's based out of the ICRW Africa office in Nairobi and has wide-ranging experience in research, monitoring, and evaluation. For over a decade, Eric has managed, designed, and led the implementation of MND6 systems, conducted project evaluations, and provided technical leadership for large-scale adolescent sexual and reproductive health programs in sub-Saharan Africa. His current work at ICRW includes providing technical assistance to a project that deals with how COVID-19 related health and economic shocks is affecting women. Welcome, Eric. Our next panelist is Ms. Mucha Mlingo, who is my apologies, I'm having a bit of a technical hitch. Please bear with me 1 second. Our next speaker, our next expert panelist is Ms. Mucha Mlingo, who is the chair of the Gender Sector Board at the Kenya Private Sector Alliance, as well as the founder and lead changemaker at PTS Africa. As the chair of the Gender Sector Board at KEPSA, she provides gender expertise to this private sector apex and umbrella body that brings together the business community into a single voice for representation, policy, influencing public policy, and for creation of an enabling business environment. Mucha is also the founder and lead changemaker at PTS Africa, which is a boutique consultancy firm that's dedicated to the development of people. Welcome, Mucha. Miss Margaret Komen is the founder and managing director of Mace Foods Limited and is based out of Eldoret, Kenya. She's an accomplished executive food technologist with a proven ability to develop and implement sound strategies that support business and financial objectives. She supervises all the production, processing, shipping, and all other operations in relation to Mace Foods business in Kenya, and is recognized in Kenyan women business circles as an expert in applying entrepreneurship skills and concepts that are relevant for small and medium enterprises. Ms. Caroline Kosiom is the Assistant Manager for Trade, Policy and Research at the Kenya National Chamber for Commerce and Industry. And she has over 10 years of experience in trade facilitation, policy research, SME and private sector development, and has undertaken research studies and policy analysis that are aimed at improving the policy and regulatory environment within Kenya, East Africa, as well as the Great Lakes region. Welcome, Caroline. And our final expert panelist will be Ms. Sarah Nduta, who is a gender specialist at ICRW, and she has over 10 years experience in gender mainstreaming and inclusion, as well as women's economic empowerment, health system strengthening, health, research design, and data analysis. And she is one of the researchers who worked on this initial Women in Manufacturing study. So welcome, Nduta. I'd like to welcome all of our panelists. So before we get into the panel discussions, we're going to have a recap of the previous webinar and the findings that have come out of the Women in Manufacturing study. So over to you, Nduta. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cleopatra. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you may be joining us from. And thank you so much for making time to be part of the discussion today. So as Cleopatra has mentioned, this is the second part of a two-part series. We held the first webinar on the 22nd of June, and today we want to pick up from there. So I will quickly take us through some of the key highlights in terms of the emerging issues and the recommendations that stemmed from the panel discussion. So with focus on the emerging issues, we had a consensus that as a country, we have a very elaborate policy, institutional, and regulatory framework that guides and supports operations within the manufacturing sector. Such include the Vision 2030, the Employment Act, the Industrial Policy, and others, many more others. And there exist, of course, different government departments, agencies, commissions that are tasked with ensuring that manufacturing is promoted, is coordinated, and is even regulated. But importantly is that a lot of these policies that are governing the sector remain to be gender blind. So what this means is that when a gender lens is not included within the policy formulation, it means that mainstreaming and making the policy inclusive is definitely going to be hard during implementation. So in the end, what we see is that the existence of these policies and frameworks has not really translated into equitable participation of women into the sector. The discussions also pointed to a low uptake in regard to STEM courses by women. And we see disparities, especially with focus on TVET enrollment, with women at only 33% as compared to the men at 67%. And this is looking at data of a 5-year range. Reasons for the low uptake could be have been attributed to poor attitude to STEM courses, being seen as complex and hard by girls and women, and lack of career guidance. And most importantly, the fact that the sector, which is where the skills will get to be used, is rarely involved in the curriculum design and even in the rollout of the trainings. And also, when they are the consumers of knowledge and training and they're not included, then we end up with men and women who have skills, but again, the skills are either not relevant for the industry or either not up to standard or do not meet even the requirements of the sector, and hence they do not get to be competitive for the market. The discussions also pointed to the fact that the sector is male-dominated because of limited technical skills by women, and because also our social and cultural and gender norms mostly socialize girls to believe that manufacturing and all these other sectors within the non-traditional realm are a field for men. So what this means in a nutshell is that there exist very few role models within the sector who are willing to maybe hold the hands of the young girls and the women, to work with them, to enable them to grow their skills, to increase on their competencies, and to guide them on how to nurture and grow their enterprises and even become competitive and productive within the industry. Next slide, please. Thank you. In terms of recommendations, we need to be very intentional in putting in place mechanisms that can increase the number of girls entering and being trained within, being retained within the STEM courses. There was a suggestion for affirmative action that would mean having quotas on the number of girls that must be enrolled at a given time, so that this then becomes a target for the institutions undertaking the technical training to meet, to ensure that throughout the training, we have enough girls who are undertaking the technical courses. And for us to be able to attain these, then it means that we need to increase on our advocacy efforts and STEM awareness campaigns, including within the rural settings, so that we can encourage school leavers to join the technical training institutions and even uptake the STEM courses. Another recommendation is to minimize on the skills mismatch issue, to ensure that the industry participates meaningfully in how the training is to be done, how the training is to be rolled out, and also in development of the curriculums. This would then mean that part of the training time that is assigned in the course is dedicated to an internship, so that maybe 50% of the time is spent within the classroom, and the other 50% is dedicated to practical experience and learning at the industry. So then there would be a real transition of skill sets from the classroom to the job market and even to the sector. And we learned that this is something that TVET has been trying to roll out on a small scale though, and hopefully this can be scaled to more courses and even to more regions within the country. Of course, we need to ensure that the industry is attractive to women by having smart, gender focused investments that can make the sector more appealing for women and girls. This would include having incubation programs where maybe girls are supported to come up with projects or with programs that are guided by mentors and with support from the industry. We also know that a key obstacle to women's participation is that in a lot of economic endeavors is their triple gender roles that they play at the household, at the community, and even at the workplace, and the care work that they are engaged in. So putting in place mechanisms to alleviate such challenges, for example, having childcare solutions that are near the training institutions, maybe providing bursaries and other financial incentives that can help girls and women to uptake technical training education is going to be very important as we move forward to be able to increase the participation of women and girls within the industry. And also as the industry, ensuring that we cater for important issues such as social protections, maternity, and flexibility of time, which are also important considerations that women make with regards to career choices and with regards to even uptaking existing training programs. We know that the future of work lies in technology and in innovations around data use and data fluency. This shows that there is a window for girls and women's engagement within the industry because with automation, it means that skills in technology, it means that we can now, girls can now qualify for jobs that have been previously allocated or dominated by men. And with the digital fluency, I think it means also that for girls and women, they can take advantage of online platforms in order to develop their skills, to reskill and to upskill. With that, I would like to thank all of you and take it back to you, Cleo. Thank you.
Thank you, Njuki, and thank you for sharing with us what came out of that first webinar. I think the recommendations it was quite an insightful discussion, and I think we want to build on that with these next mini panel discussions. So our first panel today is going to be really around talking about or discussing the female skill set pipeline as it stands. And we're going to have 4 speakers. It's going to be Ms. Caroline Njuki, Ms. Phyllis Kiplagat, Ms. Evelyn Komba, and Dr. Eric Yogon. So so if our speakers can all turn on, yes, their cameras so that we can all see you, that's great. And I'm going to start with you, Caroline. So in light of what Njuki has shared with us with regards to the pipeline and the skill set requirement for manufacturing, we know that relevant skills training will require bridging education as well as training as we move into this new world of work. So as the Chief Advisor on Inclusive Jobs and Education at ILO, how does this lack or these limited technical skills impact women's ability to obtain and secure decent, dignified work in manufacturing? Over to you, Caroline.
Thank you so much, Cleopatra, and allow me from the outset to really thank ICRW for inviting us to this conversation. We're very privileged also as the UN agency responsible for the world of work. Of course, we're always keen to work with other organizations that take the same approach. Allow me to start off by just indicating when we think of manufacturing, not in the space that we are in, for most people, men and women, young and old, manufacturing brings to mind an image of tough men. And yesterday, as I was doing my final touches of preparation for this conversation, I actually went back online and looked up imagery on manufacturing. It was predominantly male. Articles on manufacturing have a tough guy, with their PPE. And that's sort of the image that is passed on to girls. And Sarah has just spoken to this. There are those social norms that, sort of make us want to take roles that are more aligned to our gender roles. So women classically, and this sounds like, repeating norms that we don't want to speak about, but that is reality. Women want to sort of take those roles that are considered to be more female, that are maybe softer. But I would like to address this from, one is a lack of awareness of the opportunities that exist in the manufacturing sector. It's vague and it's seen as complex and it's not something that we get into. And so not being able to unpack what those opportunities are, what the competencies required are, still keeps away women from pursuing those opportunities. And awareness of those roles, breaking it down would really interest women in many of those roles, because honestly, they are not complicated. They are skills that women would actually enjoy acquiring. There is, and I mean at all levels, because manufacturing is not just working on the production line. It is supporting the entire sector. The STEM has been mentioned, and it constantly comes up, that if we would want to see more women in manufacturing, then STEM is a good starting point. But we talk of STEM from a higher education perspective. We talk about STEM and then throw in engineering, you very sort of very high level skills, which are excellent, but for an economy like Kenya, that's not really where the jobs are. Yes, there is a small percentage of those very highly skilled or very high competencies that are required in engineering, etc. But we have got an entire sort of mid-level positions in manufacturing that are also a consequence of STEM. And those are provided through technical vocational education and training. You know, when you look at it, and some of the statistics have been demonstrated, you know, you see again, you look at girls, they want to take fashion design, they want to take cooking, you know, so they stem away from courses like welding, pipeline welding, from courses, you know, that would really bring them into those professions. You know, acquisition of hands-on skills, communicating to women that hands-on skills will keep them in jobs, you know, that it is not just, you know, pursuing engineering at master's level, at doctorate level is going to have more women take up those skills and therefore participate in the manufacturing sector. Then two, Cleopatra is, you know, women are less likely, sorry?
Thank you, Caroline. I'd like to cut you off there just a bit because I have a feeling what you're going to go into next, we will touch on in your next question. So thank you. And this focus on breaking down manufacturing for women so that they understand it's not just about masters, it's not just about these tertiary level training, and it's also about thinking about, I think your example of pipeline welding, when women are not thinking about that, especially as we think about energy, we think about mining and gas in our economies, these become more skills that are more and more required. So thank you, Caroline, for that. Let me move to the next person I'd like to ask a question. Phyllis. So this question is for you, Phyllis. So what is the experience, and taking into account some of the comments that Caroline has just made, what is the experience of the National Industrial Training Authority on training women in these roles that may be non-traditional? And how does the pipeline look in terms of supply of a gender equal workforce for this sector? So what does the pipeline look like, and what can be done for continuous flow and improved gender equity? Over to you, Phyllis.
Thank you. My name is Phyllis Kiplagat. I am from National Industrial Training Authority. As you've been told, National Industrial Training Authority is a government, a semi-autonomous government agency. It was formed under the Industrial Training Act of 2011. It's actually the precursor of the Directorate of Industrial Training. The mandate of NITA is to ensure an adequate supply of labor at all levels of industry, and this includes manufacturing. As NITA, the mandate also of NITA is to regulate industrial training, and we do this by pre-skilling, upskilling, and reskilling. So what do we mean by this? In the context of NITA, when we say reskilling, we mean we work closely with industry to train fresh graduates. So the industry will identify the courses they are interested in, and then identify people to be trained, and we work together in pre-skilling. So our pre-skilling means that it is demand-driven, industry-driven. Now, when we talk about reskilling, we talk about people who have already had an experience in industry, but their skills are becoming obsolete because of, mainly because of technology. So NITA also works with industry to ensure that their employees are reskilled when necessary, when there's that disruption from technology. upskilling means improving the skills of employees who are already working. And we do this through 3 industrial training schemes. This is apprenticeship schemes, endangered learnership schemes, and skills upgrading schemes. When I talk of schemes in ITA, we mean the frameworks that are used to regulate industrial training. So we develop schemes or review schemes when there is need in industry, when there are changes in industry, and we must change to respond to those changes. So we have 11 industrial training schemes that we use to regulate training in industry, and then we have the schemes are mainly apprenticeship schemes, endangered learnership, and then we also have trade testing rules that is used to guide the assessment of those who have gained skills either formally or informally or non-formally in industry.
Can I just interrupt, Phyllis, and ask you a particular question? If you could just touch on the question that I asked around the pipeline look for gender, for gender equality. So are we seeing a lot of women, young women or older women being trained through NITA, or is it still predominantly a male training workforce?
When you look at the pipeline, in NITA, we mainly see male. It's male dominated. If I can give you an example of a course that we do in NITA called Future General. If I give you the statistics for the year from 2015 to 2019, we had 22 male vis-a-vis 0 female. 2016, 7 male, 0 female. 2017, 10 male, 0 women. 2018, 14 men and 5 female. And in 2019, 15 male and 5 female. So that tells you that there's a problem. There's a problem in manufacturing sector. And the main reason why there's a problem is because the sector is mainly driven by technology and engineering skills. And the feeder of this is STEM subject. Somebody has mentioned that. So when you talk of STEM, what comes to your mind is that it is a male-dominated area. So women fear, or girls fear to take STEM. Right from high school, that problem is seen where young girls prefer the softer skills. So then it follows that.
Phyllis, I'm going to interrupt for just because of time, and I'm going to come back to you. But thank you. I think the statistics that you've just shared, every single year in the course that you shared, there were men and there were 0 women. It was 100% male enrollment, which says a lot. And that's just one of the courses. And you've mentioned a whole lot of courses that NITA is running. So thank you. We will be coming back to that. So my next question is for Ms. Evelyn Komba, who is the Gender and Advocacy Lead at SGD Kenya Forum. So as a specialist who is working with the SGD Kenya Forum, how can we position our technical education with a focus to enable us to attain these sustainable development goals, especially in light of what you're hearing from Phyllis and also what you've also heard from Caroline at the top of this panel discussion? Over to you, Eva.
Thank you. My fellow panelists spoke and my heart dropped, and it's not something that I have not experienced. Cleo, I just want to give a small background of some work we did in Kajiado County. We received some 50 million to take girls through, to take young women and boys through TVETs in Kajiado County in 2018. So we put out a call for applications, and we were looking at 1,000. We received 940 applications from boys and 60 from girls. And when we received the 60 from girls, they were girls of non-Maasai origin. So the department was okay, you know. We sent out a call and we have received applicants, but the director and myself, I was that time an education sector specialist in the office of the governor. We were disturbed, so we went out to find out why were there fewer girls, almost zero girls from the Maasai community applying into this course. So we went into the villages with a truck, trying to find out where were the girls. And Cleo, we cannot discuss issues of manufacturing, STEM, and TVETs in this country if we don't factor in the aspect of violence against women. The girls we were looking for had been cut and married off. The girls we were looking for had undergone FGM and were in the process of being married. The girls we were looking for were searching for water, responding to the severe aspects of the drought that was wiping livestock. The girls and some boys who were looking for Maasai origin had gone to look for pasture in Tanzania. So we clearly would, even if we put up efforts, we would not get the numbers we were looking for. So we went back to the drawing board and said, what do? We realized that the criteria we had put in place for recruitment was very exclusive. Because if we said we were looking for girls who had gone up to class 8, these girls are married off at class 7, class 6. These girls are looking for pasture in class 2, class 1. So they are not available in the market of training. So we decided that the first thing we were going to do away with was the criteria. We were going to operate with no criteria in this space. So what I'm trying to say is that when we work around TVETs in this country, we make the criteria homogeneous, forgetting that there are certain aspects in each and every environment that bar or facilitate uptake of TVET courses. In pastoralist communities, for instance, we should not have a criteria because of the elements of violence against women, increased elements of violence against women in these spaces. Number 2, the girls that were married were willing to come to school, but they were wives. Their status had changed from girls to wives. So we set up a program that then needed to accommodate the men. So we had to negotiate with the men and say, okay, the girls are going back to school and we are going to, it became a family program. The other aspect was that the normal routine TVET, 8 to 5, 4 to 6 would not work. So we had to work around the schedules and see at what time do the girls come in, at what time. And that meant the program became very expensive. There was need for increased investment in this program. The other bit is that now you have girls and boys who have, who are here to be trained, but their literacy levels are rooftop. They can hardly read or write, and they need to get into the TVET. So what we did was, first of all, and it's a continuing program in Kajiado County, to have the county come up with an aggressive adult literacy program to, first of all, prepare the individuals to learn how to read and write, then take them through the TVETs. The other aspect was there's the need that we needed a policy to accommodate all this. So the gender policy had to be, we had to start working around an education policy for TVETs. That is a gender and education policy for TVETs to accommodate this thing, because in government you can not operate in a very blind, it's not a free space like sort of civil society. Anything has to be anchored on something, and also to allow for budgets to work around it. So what am I saying? I'm saying that we are used to our TVET programs are structured in a way that they are tapping into the very normative aspect of the population. Who's our target? Girls who have not made it to university. I am a product of a TVET. I started my education at the Kenya Polytechnic. And I went to the TVET because I didn't know that I could make it to university. I scored a B. But because my father knew Kenya Poly, that's where I was taken. But when I went there, I realized that I was a candidate for the university. So I didn't have any passion towards what I was doing. When I came out of there, the regulatory environment was prohibitive. To get a certification from the Pharmacy and Poisons Board meant that I spent another almost 100,000. So I am literally absent.
I'm going to have to
absent
cut you short. Again, in the interest of time, thank you, Eva. This is crafting actually quite a strong narrative, where now you're talking about, if we want to have true, meaningful participation of women in this sector, we have to be thinking across the country. We have to be looking at communities that would not even be thinking of entering manufacturing. And we actually, now touching on what Phyllis mentioned previously, we need to be thinking about what are our entry requirements, because our entry requirements and then the way we implement our training has an effect on that pipeline when it comes to including women or more women participating in this sector. So over to you, Eric. And my question to you is, in light of what you've heard from Phyllis, from Caroline, and from Eva, as a gender specialist, and also one of the researchers who was working on this Women in Manufacturing study, what would you say would be the best practice to boost the female talent pipeline for manufacturing?
Thank you very much, Cleo. And thank you, my fellow panelists. I've really enjoyed the perspectives that the team have shared. So looking back at the research that we conducted last year, the Women in Manufacturing study, recalling what Njuki shared in terms of the barriers that we were able to identify, which we talked about in the last webinar. One of the things that we need to look at, because the barriers is basically that women, we live in a culture or in a society that views all these technical colleges with that they are masculine in nature, so that the feminine, the ladies are not able to look at it and actually apply for this opportunity. So to look at that pipeline, I think we need to look at our training, our education system, right from primary school, the secondary school and university. And that particular story about that one of the panelists was to join university, but decided to go and take up this TVET course at Kenya Polytechnic. So one of the things that we note is that I think there are not enough mentors or mentoring programs that are not reflective on meeting the needs of females, so that because we are dealing with social norms around that this is reserved for men, and whenever there is a lady who takes up these opportunities, yes, I've seen in the newspapers where there's a lady who's driving this tractor for constructing roads and all these big machines, but how much do we go in terms of encouraging other girls to be able to look at that as an example, right from the word go, even as teachers are conducting this, the classes. So a subject like mathematics, that, oh, boys are usually very good in maths and compared to girls. The picture should change so that it's about all children are able to perform well in mathematics. So by the time they finish class 8, for example, those who are not able to proceed, can they take advantage of the TVET opportunities? And one of the issues that I thought I needed to bring out here is how much do we listen to this, to girls, especially those who've completed class 8 and for one reason or another, not able to go to secondary school? Do we understand what it is their needs, and how do we go about supporting them, and not really thinking about the usual courses like go and do hair salon or do food industry and that kind of, which is, and when you talk of food industry, not the entire food sector like we have with Mace, but the small cooking and vending food. But how can we look at them and say, okay, are there women who've been doing this since they left school? And can we, what is the experience? Can we share that with a lot of them, so with a lot of other young women, so that they actually understand what's happening? And when you do that, there are networking opportunities that needs to be established. So whether somebody completed class 8 or Form 4 or a technical college, is there a network of these young girls who would be able to even ask questions? Or look at what are the experiences that so-and-so has gone through. Can I learn from that? And if those networks exist, how do a young girl get into those networks, and how can they participate even in planning how to achieve that? So yes, there could be funding opportunities, but these girls might not know how to tap into them, recognizing that we are coming in from an environment where everybody is thought to be for boys, because it's about dealing with machines, it's about electrical issues, it's about mechanical issues that we think of men the first time. I think we need to look at change the working environment, especially in terms of the unconscious biasness that we have as a society towards women. So that's what I would say.
Thank you, Eric. So I'm now going to go back to Caroline. In light of what your fellow panelists have discussed and mentioned, and also going back to the second point that I think you wanted to add before I had to cut you off. Very rich conversation, and I seem to be cutting everyone off because we have lots of other speakers who we need to get to. But back to you, Caroline. As a specialist who's working on these inclusive jobs and education, and thinking about what we have heard from your fellow panelists, what strategies beyond what we've heard do you think needs to be implemented? So what strategies do you think need to be implemented to meet these dual demands around having an inclusive workforce for manufacturing, as well as having a diversity of talent within manufacturing, and then also in light of the future of work and the changing work landscape? Over to you, Caroline.
Thank you. And unfortunately, I'm not going to speak to something outside of what we've had. I'll just maybe recast it in a different way, because these are the real issues. And some of those things, strategies have already started to emerge, and I think that they're really key for consideration. One is thinking around how to enable the skilling, reskilling, and upskilling. We are talking constantly about, the fourth industrial revolution. There are proponents for that. Others indicate that we are not there yet in Africa, and we'll need to, it will still take a lot of time, but I think we are no longer talking about the future of work. That future is already here, and that has been proven almost beyond any reasonable doubt in the last 1 year. I mean, just look at how we are having this meeting today. And so, it's looking at what labor market intelligence do we have? What is it telling us? But that's not enough. How do we translate that labor market intelligence into the training space? And that is where the very critical role of collaboration between industry and training comes in, because industry knows these are the trends, these are the shifts in manufacturing, we have completely new skills. And sort of it's sort of an open market, because these are skills that almost everyone has got an opportunity to access. There's also the emergence of online learning that I know that access to the internet and gadgets is an issue, but in a country like Kenya, we still have a relatively high mobile penetration and reasonable access to internet. And if it's not that, there are other options through which people can learn. But how do we package that? At times I speak with university students, not women in the rural areas that we think don't know. And I said, do you know that there are these learning platforms like Coursera, like Udemy? And they say, what is that? And it may surprise those of us who sort of interact with this every day, but there are so many people that do not know that they could learn how to code and eventually go into really complex software development through simple coding that does not require prior. You don't need a degree. You just be able to read and write in a very basic way. To clear with your indulgence is on looking at these alternative forms of training. I think it was Eva who spoke about it's just not possible for women who have childcare roles, but also the expenses involved in upskilling. It's not cheap. So how do we bring women into these new skills through processing like apprenticeship, where it's within a very short time, but they really learn under a master crafts person, and then with that skill can open up lots of opportunities. But then when they learn, we are still a very formal society. We want to see certificates. So how do we also use existing recognition of qualification mechanisms so that then they get this qualification that could allow them to even further upskill, but also get into formal employment opportunities that has less decent work deficits, because we also have to look at the informality that is involved in still a lot of manufacturing in our country. And those are not necessarily the kind of jobs that we are encouraging women to get into. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Talking about alternative certification, thinking about alternative training. I think this is very important, and it flows really well into the question that I want to ask Phyllis. And Phyllis, it's sort of moving on from what Caroline has mentioned around alternative methods of training. So from your experience and expertise at NITA, what training investments are going to be needed, or is NITA planning so that we can promote uptake and retention of girls? And also touching on a question and comments that I see coming in from the audience is, do you think having, as part of these training investments, having a policy of affirmative action is actually going to help at NITA? Over to you, Phyllis. Your camera is off, and please turn your camera on. Thank you, Phyllis.
Yeah, thank you for another opportunity to contribute to this very important discussion. Now, what investments? In NITA, we do have flexible training programs. So flexible training programs means that girls who dropped out of the studying can be given an opportunity to rejoin at whatever level they left. So we are quite flexible. We don't have rules to block anybody from rejoining. We also have what we call recognition of skills already possessed by women and girls. With the coming of Kenya National Qualification Framework, there is also what we call recognition of prior learning. Recognition of prior learning, we already implemented it on pilot basis, and from the experiences we had from the recognition of prior learning is that there are people out there who have wealth of knowledge and skills and competencies that are informally acquired. So when we are using this recognition of prior learning, we are giving them an opportunity to present their their skills to us, and we assess, and if possible, if we find them they're fit for whatever level, then they are given qualification for that level, no matter what level, as long as they prove to us that they have those competencies, then they are recognized and certified as such.
So what about affirmative action? Do you think that a policy of affirmative action to promote girls within your training programs would work?
Yes, it will work. In NITA, we have a corporate social responsibility program called Female Engineering Program. And every year, NITA will nominate 25 women to join engineering programs at various levels of TVET and even diploma or certificate. And it has proved to be very, very important. It has encouraged other women. It is really working, and the women really appreciate. The other important fact about NITA is that the KNQF that has been instituted, that has been gazetted in this country, for those who have dropped out, they can join NITA programs at whatever level. Even if they were not able to join class 8, to complete class 8, they are allowed to start at level 2. Level 2 is a very basic level, and they are given an opportunity to progress all the way from level 2 up to the highest level that they can make. Secondly, we are proposing mentoring programs for women to join the manufacturing sector. It is very important if you want to start, say, a farm, a manufacturing farm, without somebody to hold your hand, it will be very difficult for you to really penetrate and make it in that.
I have a question. Further,
Yes.
a last question, Phyllis. It has come from the audience, and I think it fits in very, very well with what you've just talked about, your mentoring program with manufacturing. And this is going to be the last question I will ask. It has come in from the audience, is whether NITA is doing any industry internships outside of Africa, or if all the internship programs are within Kenya, because there could be some interest from outside to involve NITA in internships. So that's a quick question from the audience before I move to the next panelist.
Thank you. NITA has been given the mandate of availing coordinating employers and graduates from TVET institutions and universities to acquire internship programs. And the internship program is local, and it is supported by the Finance Act of 2016, whereby employers who take about 10 interns for a period of 1 year are allowed to reduce taxes that they are supposed to pay the Kenyan Revenue Authority. So they are given rebates based on the amounts they paid to the interns. The question about international internship, that I think that's a challenge that you've thrown to us. It's an eye-opener. I think we'll explore those possibilities. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Phyllis. And it's great that you could answer those questions that have come in from the audience. So over to you, Evelyn. It's a question now on this mismatch of skill sets to the industry, because the next panel is really going to be talking to industry insiders. But how can we strengthen that mismatch of skill sets to the industry, especially through a gender lens? So looking at this through a gender lens. Over to you, Eva. You're muted and your camera is off.
Okay. I think there is need for us to invest in conducting a gender analysis, a routine gender analysis within the sector, to understand the gaps, the opportunities, the needs within the sector, then put in place efforts towards just responding to that. I increasingly see within the sector is that the SDGs, SDG 5 has provided for indicators and targets. And from just listening to Phyllis, it's like she is aware and operating within the indicators, or she may not be aware. So when we have targets, then we begin to know how do we then respond to meet the targets on SDGs. For instance, how many numbers, what are the global standards, how many numbers do we need for women plumbers, for women electricians, what is the SDG targets, and where are we? So we begin to measure our efforts and work towards attaining that that target. Agenda analysis will enable us to understand and fill the gaps as time goes by, and even take stock of the investments that have gone in, and as well as, you know, within the sector, I would say even the needs in terms of equipment and material, probably what is emerging within the fourth industrial revolution that we need to bring on board and integrate within the sector. The other bit is that when we begin to work around TVETs in Kenya, the element of mentorship and coaching and market linkages comes at the end of the value chain, you know, when the girls and boys are just about to get. I think for me, there's the industry players, the likes of one of our panelists here from Mace Foods, need to sit in the boards of this institution to begin to spell out the needs from recruitment, from identification, from the kind of trainers we want at the TVET level. And then such that then when we are training, we are responding from the needs at the beginning and not at the end. The girls are coached, the girls and boys are coached from the beginning to the end. So they come out as people who are ready for absorption. The regulations, the challenges are identified, so that when you're talking about taxation and KRA, the Mess Foods and NITA are able to say, no, at this level, we may want this to come next year or in 2025 or post, you know. When the government comes up with ambitious plans like the Big Four, the architects of the Big Four plans need to tell us, we will require this type of needs. We'll require this number of women. We require this number of men to deliver on this, so that we are not always just operating blindly at every level.
Thank you. And that is so important. And that's also what this piece of research that ICRW did, looking at the status of women in manufacturing in Kenya. We need data. We need a baseline. We need continuous data analysis and data generation. So my last question for this panel, and Eric, if you can keep it as brief as possible. So just rounding up this whole conversation that we have had on this panel, so could you just briefly summarize what the lack of or the limited technical skills, how this impacts women's ability to obtain secure, decent, and dignified work? If you can give us a brief comment on that.
Sure. Yeah. Just to mention that if everything that we know of that has been that has come out of manufacturing sector has largely been influenced by how male human beings believes or how they perceive things. The fact that we do not have enough women in these important sectors basically means we are missing women's contribution to this. It basically means we don't know what we are missing, because if we had equal contribution of women and males in the manufacturing sector, things could be different. But because we do not, and we're talking about data, we do not know how much we have missed out by not having enough women with the correct skills to be able to contribute. In the health sector, they say that if we build the health capacity of a woman, the entire family, the entire society significantly improves. The same is true for manufacturing sector. If we have the status and the rights of women in terms of ensuring that they are ready to contribute to the manufacturing sector, we should be able to change our society, our country, because of the important contributions that have been missing for a long time. So I think it's something that we need to look at and say, how do we address these challenges? And we've discussed a number of opportunities to bring on board the effort from women to be able to support all these endeavors.
Thank you. Thank you, Eric. And so I would like to thank our panelists for this first mini panel on the pipeline and training. I'd like to thank Caroline, Phyllis, Evelyn, and Eric. Thank you for your contributions. Do not drop off. We'll be coming back to you to ask a final question. I'd like us now to move on to the second half of this discussion, where we're speaking to the industry insiders about skill set deployment within the industry. So our four panelists are going to be Mucha Mlingo, who is the chair of the Gender Sector Board at KEPSA, Caroline Kosiom, who is the Assistant Manager of Trade and Policy and Research at the Kenya National Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Sarah Nduta, who is a technical expert at ICRW, as well as Margaret Komen, who is the founder and managing director of Mace Foods. So I'm going to, if you can turn on your cameras, ladies, I'm going to now direct my first question to you, Mucha. So we've heard about the challenges that we have in Kenya and probably across the region about having women and girls gaining the skills to enter the sector, as well as continuing or being promoted or growing within the sector. And we know that gender equality and diversity is shown to be good for business, right? So what, as the chair of the Gender Sector Board at KEPSA, what interventions do you think the industry needs to deliberately put in place to address this skill set gap that women hold, as well as increase female participation? So over to you, Mucha.
Good afternoon, Cleopatra. Thank you very much for having me here this afternoon or morning, I guess, depending on whether you're tuning in. And I'm really delighted to be part of this really important conversation. Cleo, allow me to very quickly just talk a bit and introduce KEPSA before I come to answering your question. So KEPSA, for those who may not know, is the Kenya Private Sector Alliance, and it's the apex body of the private sector in Kenya. KEPSA brings together business associations, trade associations, corporates, multinational companies, SMEs, and startups from all sectors of the economy under one umbrella to enable them to speak with one voice when engaging government and across and other stakeholders on cross-cutting policy issues that affect private sector development. So when we go to your question, there are a number of initiatives that I feel are really important, or a number of interventions that the industry can deliberately put in place to address the skills gap among girls and women. I think the first and the earlier panel, mentioned this a little, is to ensure that women and girls are actually actively involved in all policy development and decision-making processes, especially on issues that affect them. When decisions are made and women and girls are not involved in those decisions, then they cannot bring their experience to bear and ensure that those decisions are beneficial. The other thing is access to affordable digital devices and internet that allows continuous learning. Again, in the earlier panel, there was a conversation about the fact that there are so many platforms available online that individuals can access to grow themselves for those who wish to develop themselves. So it's important that there is access to the devices and internet so that women and girls can actually continue to grow themselves. A third thing I would mention is affordable credit. The implementation of the credit guarantee scheme and the Biashara Bank needs to be fast-tracked to benefit young entrepreneurs. Banks also need to provide affordable credit facilities targeting youth. KEPSA has actually partnered with the MasterCard Foundation and launched a fund to support MSMEs that were hit by the pandemic with interest-free loans that are repayable up to 6 months. And the priority was given to women and young people. So credit and access to credit is extremely important. The fourth thing, and I'm moving very quick because I know that soon you'll be telling me my time is up, is development, right? So we need capacity development programs for young women and girls, training, mentorship, incubation. It's really important that there are opportunities for girls and women to develop their skills, to participate in capacity development programs. At KEPSA, we have had several capacity development programs targeted towards women. And some of those, for example, are the e-commerce booster program that is currently running in partnership with Trademark East Africa, funded by the European Union and the UK's Foreign Commonwealth Development Office. So far, over 2,000 SMEs have been trained on e-commerce, digital marketing, and other digital skills to enable them to build capacity to operate in the digital marketplace. I think COVID has shown us how important it is to be able to, to trade online. Other programs, include.
I'm going to have to cut you off, Mucha, and we will come back to you.
Allow me to just say two more, and I will be very quick, is I think what's also important is an enabling policy environment. I think this is extremely important, especially at the county level, to encourage innovation and entrepreneurship. And then, opportunities to do business with government. I think this is also really important, and it helps to support women and girls. So there you have it. My thoughts on this question. I could have shared a lot more, but thank you very much for allowing the space to share.
Thank you, Mucha. And I think there are things that you touched on: access to credit. You talked about access to digital innovation. You talked about e-commerce. So my next question is going to be to Margaret Komen, who is the founder and managing director at Mace Foods. So you've heard what Mucha has outlined when it comes to the type of interventions that the industry needs to deliberately put in place. For you as a leading manufacturer in Kenya, what can manufacturers now do to enhance this innovative inclusion of women and girls, and what can manufacturers also do to promote gender diverse teams at an industry level? Over to you, Margaret.
Good afternoon, and thank you for including me in this program today. I'm really privileged. I've heard about all the speakers and what they are discussing.
Margaret, we're getting a lot of background. Rose, please, could you mute yourself? Thank you, Rose. Go ahead, Margaret.
Okay, yeah, I had that too. Sorry. Okay. I've listened to all the speakers, and of course, they touch about the lack of the women in STEM, so to speak, who are available for us to hire. But I think in the industry, what we need to do is first and foremost be very deliberate in the hiring and recruitment process. So we need to put in place a gender policy that clearly defines for what positions, how many women, how many men do you want to hire, the age gap, the kind of skills you're looking for. That way you make sure that everybody is included. Because if you don't have that in place, it's very, very easy to be biased, especially if in our industry, we work a lot with referrals, because you're looking for a skill that is probably not documented. So if you're just using referrals and you don't have a policy to back that process, then you're more likely not to be diverse enough or to get the right skill that you need. I think in industry, we need to build in innovative programs that they grow the diversity within the industry. So these are kind of programs where we take the trainings back to the colleges, and so that we can have that day-to-day conversation of what we require. And this includes things like internship programs, special recruitment programs where you actually go to the university and handpick, because you'll be surprised that sometimes we need some skills that are really not there, do not exist, or even are not taught in our universities. But you're able to get somebody who is close to what you want, and you can actually handpick. So we need to have those kind of programs with the colleges and universities where we can handpick. Mentorship programs where in my opinion, this is just one of the mentorship programs. I guess there are many women and girls who are watching what we are doing, and this creates a kind of mentorship program, to give them a kind of motivation to say, I want to participate in this, what is being done. Thirdly, I think internally we need to make it available to the staff, so obvious that some of the skills that are in our mindsets, we think like this can only be done by a man. I've had that experience and that discussion with my own staff, where there is something to be done and it's so obvious. They say John will do it. And I'm always asking, why did you say John will do it? Even Jane could do it, you see. That kind of being internally aligned to deliberately influence the normal thoughts that happen in day-to-day society. So industry players should, like owners, CEOs, directors, the managers, the people in charge should always keep in mind that it is very normal that the woman will always be the second choice. And so if you're deliberate about everything that you do as you're running your operations, then it will happen. Lastly, cross-training programs within the organization. For example, we know very well that in a pack house, there are a lot of women, but in the field, we tend to have more men. So when you do in cross-trainings within, so where you bring the guys who are the male and the female together and share their experiences, you're likely to entice the women to want to do the other jobs that ordinarily they would not do. So I guess those 4 or 5 points are very, very important for industry.
Thank you. Thank you, Margaret. And I really liked and touched on this point of deliberate recruitment, deliberately thinking about gender diversity within your team, and then thinking about how can we improve it, how can we increase it, and also within training, how can we make sure that both genders or all genders are actually benefiting from the opportunities that are within the company. That's key. And so following on from that to Caroline Kosiom, who works with the Kenya National Chamber of Commerce and Industry. So what we've heard from KEPSA, from Mucha at KEPSA, what she thinks, what innovations need to be done. And Margaret, as a leading manufacturer, has also talked about what needs to be done within companies. But now from the Kenya National Chamber of Commerce and Industry, what particular policy and regulatory gaps, Mucha touched on, we need to make it an enabling environment, but what particular policy or regulatory gaps continue to hinder women's acquisition of these technical skills, the finance, and inhibit them from being able to participate fully in the industry? And how can these policy and regulatory gaps be addressed? Over to you, Caroline.
Well, yes, thank you very much, everyone. My name is Caroline. I work for the Chamber of Commerce, and just a brief introduction of what the Chamber. We are a membership-based organization and presence within the 47 county chapters. I think let me go directly and discuss the issues as to why there's a limited women participation within the manufacturing sector. Basically, if you check within our membership, the technical participation of women is less than actually 3% for highly technical jobs for the entire workforce. And the reason this is so, because first of all, when you look at the background for women, is that there is more of learning to do, the technical learning that is acquired is actually more of culturally acquired, especially in terms of the technical skills. And you find that our formal education system, which now it touches on the policy aspect, is that it just sometimes provides an augmenting role, but not really strengthening the trainings aspect. So you find the disparities in the technical knowledge that has been brought forth from the cultural aspect is further augmented in the education system, basically probably due to limitations of the financial resources to actually provide a more practical training so that women who have not been able to learn from their cultural background are now able to learn through the education system. And as one advances through the education system between primary and secondary, you realize that now the interest in technical jobs really subsides significantly, because there is no opportunity now or hope to see oneself pursuing other courses that are technical in nature. So the policy aspect is in terms of the education policy, particularly on the content and the presentations, and the fact that there isn't really a strong policy in regards to the practical training for students. At the same time, there isn't an affirmative government policy on employment for women in a technical space. And at the same time, there isn't an affirmative action that provides an incentive for people to employ women within that space. And you, for example, what incentive would Komen have to employ more women within her manufacturing space, especially keeping in mind already the biasness of the fact a woman cannot do? Does she have an incentive that a payee paid to a woman who is working in a technical space is lower? I mean, is there an incentive for organizations who have involved more women and mentored more women in manufacturing? Do they have incentives such as a lower tax bracket if they meet the gender parity aspect? So, I mean, the government has never really provided an incentive for people to take affirmative action. If today Komen knew, she would probably pay less taxes or get more certifications on inclusivity that would give her an upper hand in relations with investors, in relations with the public. If she thought that would really give her an upper hand, she would do everything to make sure she employs women in manufacturing, and in particularly the very hard jobs that is perceived to be men dominated. So I feel like there's, other than the cultural biasness and the lack of support within the education framework, there's also no incentive for the manufacturing sector to even have a desire. Remember, training employees is very involving. It's draining.
I'm going to have to cut you off. And the reason I'm going to have to cut you off is because you've touched on something that I don't want us to lose through the flow of the discussion. You touched on affirmative action incentives. I think this is something that this is the first time I'm sort of hearing it come through the flow of this discussion. What can we do about taxes? What can we do to actually incentivize manufacturers from the government side of point of view to actually look at increasing gender diversity? I'd like us to note that. And before I move to Nduta, my next question is going to be to you, but I will be coming back to this incentive. I'd like to take note, Caroline, of your background. I think you're in the office at the Kenya National Chamber of Commerce, and all the pictures in the back are men. There's not a woman's picture up there. So when you're talking about your 3% representation of women in technical fields, we really are seeing it behind you. So thank you for that. Now I'm going to go to you, Nduta, and thinking also about everything that has been said by Caroline, by Mucha, and by Margaret. So what, and we have touched on these sociocultural norms. I'd just like you to expand on them a bit more about the gender norms within the workplace, right? So within industry. So how do gender norms within industry impact the development of technical skills for women? And also, how can industry players address these gender norms that we're seeing within the workplace? Over to you, Nduta.
Thank you very much. I like the fact that my fellow panelists have already touched on the issue of the socio-cultural and gender norms and how they affect the place and the space of women at the workplace and even beyond. And specifically borrowing from Eva's experience when she was trying to get girls to enroll into education in Kajiado. The way I see and interpret it is first that our country is largely patriarchal in nature, Men are seen to be the heads, to be the leads on so many fronts. And this in itself is a challenge in terms of creating the voice for women and the space for girls to even speak for themselves, to lead and to own resources and participate in manufacturing and other enterprises. In the Women in Manufacturing study, where we talked to women who are owners of businesses, who are leading manufacturing enterprises, a key challenge for these women entrepreneurs was accessing financial facilities, such as loans from banks, but because of the cultural and the gender norms, which came in their way because either they did not have ownership of land or even other natural resources. And that is what we find within our culture, that more often than not, even when women have access to such kind of assets, then they have limited control of these. So when they have no control of land and these are the resources, they cannot be able to use them to expand their businesses and even to use such kind of investments in a way that would help them to sort of develop their career. And it is also because of patriarchy that we have seen very deeply rooted cultural and gender norms that affect the development of technical skills among girls and women. And these range from misconceptions, and I'm happy that also a section of the panelists have also talked on this. And such misconceptions, such that, for example, certain jobs are acceptable for women, like cooking, like doing the household chores, and some others are not acceptable to be for women, and that girls possibly excel better in certain courses, such as languages, the social studies, but not in sciences and in other STEM-related courses. So, and we get to just ask ourselves, why are not so many women within the metal industry, within the industries such as building and construction? Why is that so? And it's largely because of these perceptions which are driven in during our socialization, and basically when girls are growing up, they end up growing that as a girl or as a woman, I have limits, and for example, I should be a homemaker in the future, and I should concentrate more on cooking and on other household chores, while boys concentrate more on cores that are largely manual and they are technical related, like fixing things which get broken and such. And so they begin to develop interest and get inculcated into technical areas early enough. Again,
thank you. I'm going to have to cut you short, Nduta, and go back to the first panelist. My apologies. So I'm going to go back to you, Mucha. And taking into account also what has been discussed within this panel, and that thread, which I will go back to Caroline about what affirmative action or incentives can government put in place around increasing gender diversity in manufacturing, but also touching on what was discussed in the previous panel about industry's role in developing training programs. So particular to all those points that I have raised, what do you see as the role of industry in the design and scale up of technical training, especially with a focus on women and girls? Over to you, Mucha.
Thanks, Cleopatra. So I think the first thing I'd say that it's really important that we entrench gender equality and diversity and inclusion in public and private sector employment policies. We've spoke a little about it across the two panels, this idea of really empowering women, affirmative action, but just making sure that this is something that is deeply entrenched. I think an earlier panelist talked about intentionally recruiting. So really entrenching gender equality, diversity, and inclusion in public and private sector employment policies. This should be made mandatory to ensure that the 2/3 gender rule is achieved. And then it's also important that regular monitoring is done in order to ensure enforcement. A second thing is, I think, to promote promoting change of backward cultural and social attitude towards women. I think this is really important. In the first panel, one of the panelists, forgive me, I forget the name of the individual mentioned, talked about the fact that, you know, we need to talk about what we're talking about today in the context of understanding what's happening in terms of gender-based violence. So it's really dealing with some of the root issues that are rooted in our cultural and social biases towards women. And this will ensure that there is equal pay for equal work. It will break the burden of some gender roles and improve support at family level and encourage ownership of property. We talked about the idea that women do not own as much property. The third thing I would say is we need special work programs that target women. You know, for example, Kazi Mtaani has created significant support for young people, but there is need for collaboration in creating more sustainable jobs. Involvement of all stakeholders in planning of these programs is also key for their success. And then lastly, I would say also support in entrepreneurship development. So this idea of internship, mentorship, incubation programs to nurture young women, to nurture young entrepreneurs. There is need for linkages with TVETs to ensure youth and entrepreneurs in the informal sector can get certification for the skills that they acquire through apprenticeship. And, you know, the government has already extended the 50% tax rebate on employee emoluments for companies that engage at least 10 TVETs and university graduates, as was mentioned earlier. And so, you know, while KEPSA is implementing the Wezesha Youth Placement Program, similar to the Kenya Youth Empowerment Project that saw over 20,000 youth benefit, it's really important that this is rolled out across the private sector.
Thank you. And thank you for noting and outlining some of the programs that are in existence and touching on the tax rebates that Phyllis had mentioned. But now, as we think, maybe thinking beyond just tax rebates around internships, but also thinking about maybe tax rebates when you hire more women, like Caroline has mentioned. So over to my next question for you, Margaret. So as an industry player, as a leading manufacturer, you also talked about deliberately recruiting women. So what mechanisms or policies have you put in place, or can companies put in place to attract more women into the company? So this is going beyond just the general industry, but really thinking about company policies around explicit recruitment, retention, promotion. What can be done? Over to you, Margaret. You're muted.
Oh,
You're still
okay,
muted.
thank
There
you. Yeah.
Margaret, you're muted again.
Somebody keeps muting me.
Okay, now just
all right.
start.
Yeah.
There you are. Go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll start with the most important, money. Money is, for me, the most important. So how are the salary scales in your organization structured? Is it placing the women roles to be attractive? So you need to make them balanced. We do not say we want them to be unfair, but to make them balanced so that whatever role you're putting in place, say for example, if you're going to pay overtime, a simple thing like overtime, is it standardized? Is it across all the job roles and skills that you're running in your organization? That's something really critical to look at. Two, what culture do you have in your organization that ensures there's no discrimination or bullying? Because we know if we are going to put the men and the women in one working space, how do you ensure that there is no bullying or discrimination or any sexism of whatever type is taking place during the workplace? I remember when I was an intern many years ago, I worked in meat industry, and in the butchery, it was only men. And I remember every time you passed along the corridor, they would tap you in the wrong places. So, you know, I'm just, now that I'm in the industry, I'm always cognizant of those kind of things. So you need to make sure that you have built a culture, or you encourage that kind of culture where there's no bullying, no discrimination, or no looking down. Simple things like, what kind of uniforms do the women wear? You know, how do I look when I'm going to work? We know that they like to look nice. So if they're going to be wearing metal looking shoes and caps that make them look really awkward, they'll not be attracted for those kind of jobs. So you have to look at little things that are happening within your industry that would make them want to do that job. Now, fourth, you have to create attention for the roles. What have you done within your organization to make sure that there is attention to those kind of jobs? Because it's very easy for us to ignore those kind of things. I'll give an example, like who maintains your vehicles in the organization? It's always some guy who is outside doing nothing. Would that encourage a woman to go out there? Are they working in the, so it's all about the work environment generally, but there are also other factors. Can you use management who are men to mentor the younger women? So that kind of training and linking them together. So I call that professional mentoring, because all the time, you know, you are talking to Caroline and saying they are all men behind her. And all are those, any of those men helping to hold the hands of the younger ones, the younger women who are in the junior positions. Leadership opportunities. Yeah, I know you're about to cut me short, but I'm thinking like associations, yeah, associations like CAM, Chamber of Commerce, KEPSA, those kind of things. When the women are encouraged to be members, whether they're already practicing or not, I'm sure all these organizations have a slot for them or should create a slot for them. Otherwise, it will be always be for those who are already in that space. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. That is very important, and I hope for all of those who are within the industry who are hearing this now and are also going to hear the recording, that you actually think about the workplace environment, because that matters. When the culture that is built within your organization. So that really does matter. To you, Caroline, who had Margaret has mentioned, she mentioned mentoring and wondering whether all the men in these industries are actually mentoring women as well. I'd like to hear from you what mechanisms sector players can use to manage these skill set transitions, especially during this era of automation, and also what mechanisms we can put in place to improve mentorship and address these skills mismatch with industry requirements. Over to you, Caroline.
Yes, so yes, there's the issue of the skills mismatch, and basically that is because what is happening within the industry does not really transition in time to the education sector. And there's only one solution to that, which I appreciate that TVET has already started doing that, is that they continuously involve the private sector in terms of their discussions to see what is happening. But I find that the kind of level of involvement is highly limited, particularly by financial resources to collect real-time data on what really is trending out there in the private sector. So you find, yes, there's already the concept that there should be industry surveys to be done to ensure that what the manufacturers need is what is being taught in the education sector. However, currently, because I sit in the TVET committee, is there's more of just my opinion as Carol in what I think is happening in the private sector, but you know very well that should not be a reliable approach. I think should be large-scale repetitive studies, either done on quarterly basis, in which manufacturers give feedback on what they expect, what is their opinion about the fresh graduates that they had, what do they think would have been improved on them, and what do they think is the skills for the future, and where would the trainers for such come from. Now, that also brings another problem, because even as much as we identify the current skills that are needed, there's the other side of the education system on the way in which teachers are recruited. So you find the teachers on they've never gone back for refresher trainings, the same things that the industry needs are not aware of. You find there's a lot of, the students could even be knowing more than the teacher, because the teacher has been isolated from industry for a long period of time. So then it makes the question asked, what would be the criteria of the teacher, of a TVET teacher? Should they just be graduate from a technical school and they go back and teach? Are they really competent enough? We should be thinking of, they should have been industry experience or practice in terms of you being a teacher should not just be the fact that you got a certificate and be called a teacher. You should have worked in industry and then being able now to either be a hybrid actually of industry and academia, because it's already happening. And then the question now, it comes back to then the remuneration. If you really had to employ that engineer that is employed at the same time in Safaricom, how are you going to afford them? Even if you need them on just maybe once a month, are you going to afford them? So there is that aspect of, there should be a new policy for TVET trainers, that they should be a hybrid of industry, and then they should be in a remuneration and a planning on how they should be compensated for their activities.
I think that's a very interesting point as well. Who does the training, and how can we also upskill our trainers within the industry? That's a very good point. My final question for you, Nduta, before I open up and ask all the same final question to all the panelists, is what role, we have all these women here who are a part of this webinar, but what role beyond this can women play to influence the industry so that it is more friendly and attractive? So what role can we as women within this industry play to improve and increase gender diversity? Over to you, Nduta.
Thank you. And going straight to it, I see several areas where women can contribute in terms of making the industry more attractive and accommodative. First, the fact that we have women as leading entrepreneurs, such as Margaret that we have today. Successful women entrepreneurs can lead by showing us how they are supporting the women within the factories or the workplaces. For example, do they have inclusive and transformative policies? Do they have good gender practices that are sensitive to the women workers who are maybe pregnant, who are breastfeeding, who need flexibility in time to attend to their children or to seek family members, or even to attend evening classes so that they can be able to obtain more skills which can make them be more competitive within the industry. So as an industry, how are we supporting the women who work within our companies? Successful women in the industry, either as business owners or as business leaders, can offer mentorship to girls and women by either giving talks within the training institutions to be able to demystify stereotypes on uptake of certain courses, and to encourage girls and women to take up careers that have been traditionally been seen as for men, and just encourage them to uptake and to be positioned to get into the industry. I think
I'm going to stop you there, Nduta, because we're already running 15 minutes late, beyond time. This has been a fantastic conversation. So if all the panelists, you can turn your cameras on, I am going to go around and ask just for your final thoughts. So please, everybody turn your camera on. And I am going to start with Caroline Njuki. If you can give us your final thoughts on what would your key recommendation for the attainment of a skilled and gender inclusive workforce in manufacturing. Over to you, Caroline.
Thank you. Really excellent conversation. I would say that it's being intentional, it's being deliberate. Nothing is just going to happen, whether it's in policy, financial inclusion, all those elements that have been raised during this conversation. It's starting to do things about them. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. It's about being deliberate. Thank you for that. Phyllis, if you can turn on your camera and give us your key recommendation for this webinar.
Thank you again for this third chance. I've really enjoyed myself. The discussions were very, very deliberate and very, very informative. I think those of us in the training sector are kind of closed. We don't know what is happening in industry. I've gotten an opportunity to hear from those in the industry, what is happening in the industry. Thank you so much. My final thought that we should strengthen the labor market information system in the country so as to actually to provide that information that is required to ensure that the training that is happening is responsive to the needs of industry. The labor market information lead actually gets to tell us the numbers of people, of graduates required in each sector, so that the planning can be done ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Phyllis. Eva, what would your key recommendation from this discussion be?
Three things, quick, Cleo. Number one, data. No, two, let them be two. Let's have data. Data is very key. We need to know how many and who. Gender statistics, not just data, but gender statistics in manufacturing. Number two, that is very, very dear to me, is can we also have new faces that speak for women who have succeeded in the sector? Can we have the struggling ones come and speak to us? Can we have those from marginalized communities come to speak to us and begin to look like role models? Because the reality is we don't have a convergence between the young and old in the sector in terms of role modeling and the ideal women that we may want to look up to. There's a disconnect.
Thank you. So thank you for that recommendation on we want to see examples of who we are in the field. Thank you, Eva. Eric, what would your final recommendation be?
Yeah, my recommendation would be that we need to identify whether we are talking to ourselves or the people that we are talking to. How are we talking to them, so that we can bring everybody to the table and recognize that we are missing a very essential element of how manufacturing would look like if we had the voice of women.
Thank you. Thank you for that thought, Eric. Over to you, Mucha. What is your recommendation?
So I think a number of the recommendations I would have made have been made already, especially the one about data, having gender data. I think for me, what I would add is that we must continue amplifying the voices of women to ensure that women's participation is not just entrenched in law, but is actually implemented. I think it's really important for women to participate where decisions are being made, so that they're able to advocate for themselves. I think for me, that is crucial. And if you allow me to sneak in a second, I think we must invest in capacity building and mentorship for women so that they can effectively participate in the manufacturing sector.
Thank you, Mucha. Margaret, what would your recommendation for today be?
Wow, everybody has said everything that's very important, but for me, I'm thinking, where are these few women, the ones we say they are very few, where can we get them? Because we need to start including them. We need to speak action. We need to bring them in. If we are saying internship, where are they? Are the TVET institutions making this information available for the industry so that we can start tapping on the ones that are already on board? So a platform or somewhere where we can find the women who are already in STEM or who are already in TVET institutions. Yeah.
Thank you, Margaret. Caroline, Kosiom, what would your recommendation be?
My recommendation would be, it's high time maybe we took advantage and made steps towards seeking affirmative action on gender inclusivity within the manufacturing sector. Already the private sector, which is manufacturing included, is taking affirmative action on climate protection, which I find it to be extremely involving and highly costly, but there's been a lot of good steps made towards that. It's called extended producer responsibility, and it's already a lot of commitment has been achieved in the private sector from the private sector. So if that action has been taken on climate, I think for gender inclusivity or for women, it would not be a very difficult task as compared to what we are seeking to achieve with climate protection. And our affirmative action should be from both culturally, academic-wise and industry-wise. So that is the incentives, academically, what we recommended. And culturally would be things like advertisement. When you're advertising technical items, don't just use male. So affirmative action to checking how we are culturally mentoring women into other sectors and not manufacturing. So that is it. For me, it's affirmative action and take advantage of the fact that there is a lot of goodwill now from the government, particularly on inclusivity.
Thank you, Caroline. And last but not least, Nduta, what would your recommendation be for the end of this conversation?
My recommendation is that women must lead by fighting for themselves and by positioning themselves. So they need to identify the training opportunities and take advantage of them so that they can be able to attain the skills that will enable them to be more competitive and to compete evenly with the men within the industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Nduta. I would like to thank all of you. We have gone over time because this conversation was so rich. There was so much to say. So I'd like to just take this opportunity to thank all of our panelists for being part of this discussion. I would like to thank the attendees. We had some drop off because we've gone over by 23 minutes. So for those who are still with us, thank you for bearing with us through this conversation, although I must say the overtime that we have had has actually just made for a richer conversation. I'd like to thank everybody, panelists and participants and attendees, for your time, your opinions and your insights. We couldn't touch on all of the comments that were made in the chat, but we will be addressing these, linking the people who have been mentioned to our panelists, and there will obviously be a recording of this afterwards we will be sharing. So what we will be doing is sharing this webinar to all the recording to all the persons who registered for it, and ICRW is going to be reaching out to our panelists for both parts of this two-part webinar series, because we'll be putting out a brief that will share some of the information and recommendations that were brought up during these two webinars. I'd like to say thank you all. This is a very enriching conversation and one that we hope to continue to have. As ICRW, as a research institution that has done some work now in the role and status of women in manufacturing, that actually has some more work ongoing, we understand and we agree with all the speakers, the need for data, the need for information, and from a gender perspective, the need for role modeling, the need for a workspace that is accommodating and attractive to all genders is very, very important. We'd like to thank all of you for your participation, and have a good evening or a good morning wherever you are. And let's keep the discussion about women in non-traditional sectors going. I'm Cleopatra Mugyenyi, and it has been a pleasure facilitating this webinar. Thank you all. Bye-bye.